Hi and welcome to Shot of Justice.
The scent hit Claire first. Not his usual cedar and sweat musk after a run, but something cloying, cheap, and unmistakably floral. It clung to the collar of the crisp blue Oxford shirt she'd ironed yesterday. The shirt she'd bought him for his last promotion. Her fingers, smoothing the fabric automatically, froze. Time didn't stop. It fractured. The cheerful morning sun streaming into their Connecticut bedroom suddenly felt harsh, exposing. The familiar hum of the coffee maker downstairs morphed into a dull roar in her ears. This wasn't the first whiff of suspicion, the late nights bleeding into weekends, the new phone passcode, the vague answers. But it was the confirmation, hanging in the air like poisonous gas. She didn't confront him immediately. Claire Abernathy, at 58, had learned patience the hard way, sculpted by decades of managing Brad's ambitions, their social calendar, and the intricate ecosystem of their family life. Josh, their 17-year-old, was her heart walking around outside her body. Confrontation now, blind and raw, was too risky. She needed to see. So she breathed through the nausea, hung the shirt back in the closet with exaggerated care, and plastered on the serene smile that had been her armor for years. She made breakfast, listened to Josh chatter about his upcoming debate tournament, and kissed Brad goodbye as he headed to his precious investment firm, Abernathy Capital, humming. The scent of cheap perfume seemed to mock her from his skin. The unraveling happened with brutal efficiency over the next 3 weeks. Brad, it turned out, wasn't just having an affair. He was dismantling their life. His new girlfriend, Kendra, was 28, worked in his office, and possessed the predatory ambition Brad found irresistible. Claire discovered the offshore accounts, the transfers disguised as business expenses, the second mortgage he'd taken out on her inherited Cape Cod cottage without her knowledge, the cottage her grandmother had left her, the only thing truly hers before this marriage. She hired a discreet, expensive lawyer. The news was worse than she feared. Brad had been meticulously funneling assets. Her role as the supportive, stay-at-home wife for 25 years counted for little in the face of his prenuptial agreement, which she'd naively signed, trusting his protection for the business spiel, and his carefully constructed financial labyrinth. The confrontation, when it came, wasn't fiery. It was glacial. Brad sat across from her lawyer's mahogany desk, radiating smug certainty. Kendra, perched beside him like a shiny accessory, couldn't hide her triumphant smirk. "It's over, Claire," Brad stated, not unkindly, just stating a fact. "We've grown apart. Kendra understands the demands of my world. We want a fresh start. And Josh," Claire's voice was surprisingly steady, a thin thread of ice in the overheated room. Brad leaned forward. "Josh needs stability. He needs to be with the parent who can provide the opportunities he deserves. Prep school, Ivy League, connections. Kendra and I can offer that. You," he trailed off, gesturing vaguely at her life defined by charity luncheons and PTA meetings. "You'll be comfortable, Claire. The prenup guarantees you the house and a modest stipend. The cottage is collateral now, but we'll sort it." "Modest stipend?" Claire echoed. The house was mortgaged to the hilt. The stipend wouldn't cover property taxes. The cottage, her sanctuary, her roots, was leverage. "Dad?" Josh looked bewildered, shifting uncomfortably in his seat. He'd been summoned, told his parents were separating, but not the details. "Mom's house is home." Brad placed a paternal hand on Josh's shoulder. "Change is hard, champ, but think of the future. New York City, skiing in Aspen. Kendra has a place in the Hamptons." He shot Kendra a smile that made Claire's stomach churn. "Your mother needs time to adjust to a quieter life." The betrayal wasn't just financial, nor merely romantic. It was the calculated theft of her son, weaponizing Josh's future against her, painting her as obsolete. The lawyer murmured about challenging custody, but the reality was bleak. Brad held all the financial cards, and Josh, at 17, was old enough for a judge to consider his preferences heavily. Brad's narrative, exciting new life versus Mom's quiet decline, was insidious and potent. Kendra finally spoke, her voice artificially sweet. "We just want what's best for Josh, Claire. Surely you see that." Claire looked at her son's confused, anxious face. She saw the manipulative gleam in Brad's eyes, the avarice poorly hidden beneath Kendra's concern. A cold, hard certainty settled deep within her, replacing the shattered pieces of her heart. Rage was a luxury. Despair was a trap. What bloomed was something far more dangerous, absolute, focused resolve. They thought they'd won. They thought she was broken, a discarded fixture of Brad's past. They thought wrong. "Of course," Claire said, her voice soft, almost meek. She met Brad's gaze, letting a shimmer of tears well up, not entirely faked. The grief was real, but now it was fuel. If you truly believe that's best for Josh." She let the sentence hang, looking down at her hands, the picture of defeated acceptance. Inside, the gears of revenge began to turn, silent and precise. "You took everything," she thought, locking eyes with Brad for a fleeting second, letting him see only sorrow. "You took my security, my trust, my home, and now my son. But you forgot one thing, Brad. You forgot who managed your life for 25 years. You forgot who knows every one of your weaknesses, every corner you cut, every arrogant assumption you make. And you absolutely forgot that a mother robbed of her child is the most formidable force on earth. This isn't over. This is just the beginning, and your fresh start will end in ashes." The legal settlement was a masterclass in humiliation. Claire got the heavily mortgaged Connecticut house. Brad got primary custody of Josh, citing Josh's expressed desire for stability and future opportunities, a desire heavily influenced by Brad's promises of a Manhattan penthouse, a new sports car upon graduation, and subtle disparagement of Claire's limited prospects. Brad kept Abernathy Capital, the vacation home in St. Bart's, the majority of the investments, and even her grandmother's cottage as collateral against a dubious business loan he claimed she owed. Her modest stipend barely covered utilities. Kendra moved into Brad's newly acquired penthouse immediately, her Instagram flooded with new beginnings and blessed. Claire stood in the echoing emptiness of the too-big house, the silence a physical weight. Josh had left a week ago, a strained goodbye filled with teenage awkwardness and Brad's impatient hovering. The pain was a raw, open wound, but Claire Abernathy was no longer the woman who ironed shirts and planned fundraisers. She was a woman forged in betrayal. Revenge wouldn't be a knife in the dark. It wouldn't be screaming accusations. Brad thrived on dominance, on financial power, on his image as the self-made success. Kendra craved luxury and status. To truly break them, she needed to hit them where they lived, their money and their precious egos. And she needed Josh back, not through a bitter court battle, but by making Brad's world so toxic, so untenable, that Josh would flee back to her of his own accord. The plan began with research, conducted in the hushed sterility of the local library, on a cheap pay-as-you-go laptop. She devoured financial news, studied Brad's investment patterns. He'd always bragged, assuming she didn't understand, and researched shell companies, offshore accounts, and regulatory loopholes. She remembered Brad's casual arrogance, his belief that rules were for lesser men, his penchant for cutting corners disguised as strategic risk-taking. She knew his Achilles heel, greed, and an insatiable need to be seen as the smartest man in the room. She needed an identity, not a physical disguise, but a financial phantom. Using skills honed managing complex household budgets and charity events, she meticulously built Eleanor Vance. Eleanor was a reclusive, recently widowed heiress from old Texas oil money, living comfortably but quietly off substantial inherited assets. Claire used a small, untraceable portion of the meager funds she'd managed to squirrel away before Brad froze everything to create the veneer. A premium mailing address, a virtual office in Austin, a dedicated, untraceable VoIP number, impeccable and fake, references built through layers of careful online fabrication. She hired a discreet, tech-savvy consultant found on the dark corners of the internet, paid for with cash withdrawn painstakingly over months, to create a near-flawless digital footprint for Eleanor. Eleanor Vance needed a trusted advisor. Enter Arthur Finch, a supposedly retired, highly respected investment banker Claire invented. Arthur existed only through a complex web of email addresses, encrypted messaging apps, and a deep, digitally altered voice Claire practiced relentlessly in her empty house. Arthur was Eleanor's gatekeeper, her protector, her voice to the outside world. Claire spent hours perfecting Arthur's cadence, a blend of weary wisdom and patrician authority. The hook was set with exquisite care. Claire, as Arthur Finch, initiated contact with Brad through a convoluted but plausible chain. A glowing and entirely fabricated reference from a mutual acquaintance at a prestigious Swiss bank Brad desperately wanted to impress. Arthur, via encrypted email, explained that his client, Mrs. Vance, possessed significant liquid assets currently underperforming with her conservative wealth managers. She sought diversification and higher returns, but only through a single, exceptionally discreet and talented fiduciary. Her late husband, Arthur implied, had been burned by Wall Street sharks. Trust was paramount. Brad, predictably, bit. The lure of managing a single, massive, low-maintenance portfolio from a reclusive heiress was irresistible. It promised huge fees, minimal hassle, and bragging rights. He saw Eleanor Vance as his golden goose, a testament to his unmatched acumen. Kendra saw dollar signs for penthouse upgrades and designer shopping sprees. The courtship of Eleanor Vance was a delicate dance conducted entirely through Arthur Finch. Claire, as Arthur, was demanding, meticulous, and frustratingly cautious. Requests for audited financial statements from Abernathy Capital, which Claire already possessed thanks to her pre-divorce discovery, were framed as Eleanor's due diligence. Queries about specific investment strategies were detailed and probing. Brad, eager to please, revealed more than he should, showcasing strategies that bordered on aggressive, even slightly questionable, confident in Eleanor's reclusiveness and Arthur's apparent approval. Finally, after months of careful maneuvering, Arthur presented the opportunity. Eleanor wished to invest a substantial initial sum, $5 million, in a specific exclusive venture Brad had mentioned in passing. It was a private equity deal involving cutting-edge medical technology. Brad knew the principles. It was semi-legitimate but carried significant risk, the kind he usually offset with safer investments. For Eleanor Vance, however, Arthur insisted this was the only initial investment she would consider. It was a test of Brad's ability to execute her specific wishes flawlessly. Brad hesitated, but the potential fee and the promise of managing the rest of Eleanor's rumored $50 million fortune overrode his caution. He convinced himself it was sound. He moved funds, including some of his own capital, to show confidence into the venture. Claire, monitoring everything through her intricate web and Brad's own boastful updates sent to Arthur, held her breath. Phase 2 began subtly. As Arthur, Claire fed Brad carefully crafted information. A rival company was making breakthroughs. Regulatory hurdles were unexpectedly high. Small negative news items, often planted by Claire through obscure financial blogs she created, began to surface. The value of the medical tech venture started to wobble. Brad doubled down, pouring more of Abernathy Capital's capital and, critically, leveraging assets, including Claire's grandmother's cottage, which he'd formerly seized, to prop up the investment and meet Eleanor's demands for constant reassurance. Kendra, oblivious, kept spending, celebrating their inevitable windfall. Meanwhile, Claire worked on Josh. Her contact was limited, monitored by Brad, and strained. She didn't badmouth his father. She knew that would backfire. Instead, she became a lifeline to normalcy. She sent care packages with his favorite homemade cookies, ignored at first, then gradually consumed. She texted about mundane things, the robins nesting in the old oak, a funny dog at the park. Never demanding, just reminding him she existed. She remembered him. She loved him unconditionally. She listened patiently when he called, venting about the pressure of his new elite private school, Kendra's attempts to be cool, Brad's constant absences. She heard the loneliness beneath the bravado. She heard the disappointment when Brad missed another parent-teacher conference or Josh's jazz band performance because of critical business with Mrs. Vance. The medical tech venture imploded. Not with a bang, but with a series of devastating whimpers, failed trials, a key patent dispute, the CEO abruptly resigning. The value plummeted. Brad was overleveraged. Desperate calls to Arthur Finch went unanswered. Emails bounced. Eleanor Vance vanished. Panic set in. Abernathy Capital was hemorrhaging money. Creditors circled. The cottage was lost. The penthouse was mortgaged. The St. Bart's house was sold at a loss. Kendra's Instagram shifted from blessed to vague quotes about resilience, then fell silent. The facade cracked. The pressure turned Brad brittle and angry. The charming financier vanished, replaced by a man snapping at assistants, yelling at Josh over minor things, drinking heavily. Kendra, faced with dwindling credit limits and Brad's unraveling temper, became shrewish and accusatory. Their fresh start was a gilded cage collapsing in on itself. Josh, caught in the crossfire, witnessed the ugly reality beneath the vanished glamour. He saw his father not as a powerful provider, but as a desperate, failing man taking his fury out on everyone around him. He saw Kendra's true colors, self-serving and brittle. The Hamptons and the sports car promises felt like cruel jokes. One rainy Tuesday, Brad exploded over a misplaced dry cleaning ticket, screaming at Josh, blaming him for adding stress. Kendra joined in, calling Josh ungrateful. Something in Josh snapped. He packed a backpack, texted Claire a single line. "Mom, can I come home, please?" and walked out of the penthouse, taking the train to Connecticut in the pouring rain. Claire opened the door to her son, drenched and shivering, his eyes holding a world of hurt and newfound clarity. She didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't gloat. She wrapped him in a warm towel, made him hot chocolate just the way he liked it, and simply held him as he cried. The sounds of the rain a gentle counterpoint to his shuddering breaths. He was home. Brad's downfall was swift and public. Abernathy Capital filed for bankruptcy. Investigations into the firm's practices, particularly the handling of the ill-fated medical tech investment and the mysterious Vance funds, were launched. Creditors seized remaining assets. The penthouse was gone. Kendra left shortly after Josh, her social media deleted. Brad was left with nothing but debt, disgrace, and the hollow echo of his own arrogance. Claire's revenge wasn't announced. It didn't need to be. She watched the financial news reports with quiet satisfaction. She saw Brad's name dragged through the mud. She received official notice that her grandmother's cottage, seized as collateral for his doomed venture, was released back to her, free and clear, as the underlying debt was invalidated in the bankruptcy proceedings. The modest stipend stopped, but she didn't need it anymore. Using the meticulous records she'd kept throughout her marriage and her time as Eleanor Vance's architect, Claire anonymously provided key documents to the bankruptcy trustees and regulators. Documents showing Brad's self-dealing, his misuse of client funds to cover his personal losses on the Vance investment, his borderline fraudulent maneuvers. It ensured his financial ruin was complete and legally binding. He wouldn't be rebuilding anytime soon. One crisp autumn afternoon, Claire walked through the restored cottage. Sunlight streamed through the windows, illuminating the familiar, comforting lines of her grandmother's furniture. Josh was outside, raking leaves, a simple chore he now approached with a quiet contentment. He'd enrolled in the local community college, finding his footing away from the pressured world Brad had forced him into. He was talking about transferring to State University for finance, but with a focus on ethics. Claire smiled. He was finding his own path. The doorbell rang. It was a process server. She accepted the envelope knowing what it contained. Brad was suing her. Frivolous, desperate claims of fraud, alienation of affection, anything he could grasp at. It was laughable. Her lawyer, the same one who'd witnessed her initial devastation, was already prepared. It would be dismissed. Brad had no money, no evidence, only rage. She stood on the porch watching the server drive away. The air was sharp with the scent of fallen leaves and wood smoke. Josh looked up, concerned. "Everything okay, Mom?" Claire looked at her son, safe, home, his eyes clear of the confusion Brad and Kendra had inflicted. She looked at the cottage, solid and hers again. She felt the quiet strength that had carried her through the storm, the intelligence they'd underestimated, the fierce love that had fueled her impossible plan. Everything, Claire Abernathy said, her voice calm, certain, and laced with a profound, hard-won peace, is absolutely perfect, sweetheart. She walked down the steps, picked up a spare rake, and joined him in the golden afternoon light. The sweetest revenge wasn't the money or the ruin she'd orchestrated. It was this, rebuilding a genuine life, reclaiming her son, and finding a profound, unshakable peace while her betrayer drowned in the chaos of his own making. She raked a pile of leaves, the rhythmic sound a soothing counterpoint to the silence. Checkmate,